Thank you again for being here this evening. I'm
Meeting
now
is
going to
being
pass
recorded.
I'm now going to pass it over to Jakinna Lepsak, who will be guiding us in this meeting today. Welcome.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for taking time out of your evening to join us tonight. My name is Jakinna Lebsock, and I serve as a Deputy Assistant Director here at Access over our Arizona Long-Term Care System, or ALTEX program. And it is my pleasure to give you some updates tonight on what's currently happening around the emergency rule and some of the policy work that the agency is undertaking regarding our ALTEX policies. So, quick overview. We will spend some time talking about the emergency rule, as well as regular rulemaking and our requirements as an agency throughout those processes. I'm going to give you an overview of policies that posted just earlier today for public comment. We'll talk about next steps, the timeline for all of the work that we're undertaking, and then how you can engage with us if you are interested in doing so. So first, an overview. And if you were with us last Thursday, this is going to be basically the same presentation that you heard last week. But you are definitely welcome to stay here, although I don't think you'll get any new information, with the exception of this one slide. So we had questions last week about what's happening right this moment. And so we did take the opportunity to add in one slide to share what the member experience should look like right now. So the new 10-1, October 1st version of our assessment tool, called the HCBS Needs Tool, or H&T, is paused. And so what the experience should be right now is that members under the age of 18 should be receiving the same services and service hours as they were prior to October 1st of this year, unless the healthcare decision maker, which in this instance is typically parents or guardians, requests a change. And when I say a change, it could be from a number of reasons. It could be that a specific service just does not work, and so you have requested to discontinue that. It could be there's a change in condition for your child, and so you want to have a reassessment, and we'll talk about that in just a second. But generally speaking, you should not have had any kind of different experience over the last several weeks as you were having prior to October 1st. If a member has a change of condition during this pause, so meaning they have had an improvement, they've had a decline, there's a new diagnosis, there's a new behavior, whatever the case may be, then that member would need to be reassessed, and that reassessment would be done with the tools and processes that were used prior to October 1st. Again, specific to the HCBS assessment process and the habilitation assessment process. For new members who join, who become eligible for the ALTEX program on or after October 1st, they would also be assessed with the tools and processes that were in place prior to October 1st. So everyone at this point should be assessed in the same way with the same tools. Again, not using the policies that we released earlier this fall, but using the processes that have been in place for the majority of the year. Along with that, there are ongoing quarterly visits. So that is one of the general principles of our ALTEX program, is that quarterly engagement with members and families. And so these visits with your support coordinator or case manager should still be occurring. So we wanted you to be aware that just because the tool itself is on pause, that ongoing communication with your health plan should still be occurring. So what's happening? That we're going to have a little bit of a high level conversation about where we are today, how we got here, and why it's important to know and where we're going to go. So Access was directed to pursue an emergency rule to support, again, that HCBS, or Home and Community-Based Services Needs Tool, that we refer to as the H&T. We had to do the emergency rule, and that also implemented a pause. So again, those policies that went live on October 1st, specific to the H&T and the guidance documents, those are paused for children under the age of 18. What this did was allow us to revise the tool, including the assessment categories and the age limit, and then establish an exception process, or what we've called the extraordinary care review process. And really that means that if a child were to be assessed with the new H&T when that policy goes into effect, if there's a concern about the hours that are assessed tied to the member's age, then there's a secondary process to look at those services and the child's unique needs and conditions to determine if additional service hours should be authorized to serve that individual. So, big picture, when we talk about an emergency rule, what does that mean? An emergency rule is a short-term rule in Arizona Administrative Code that gives the agency the authority to take certain actions. So think of it kind of like an instruction manual. It's a high-level set of requirements that we as Access have to implement and then put into a format that our health plans can also meet the requirements on. An emergency rule is only valid for 180 days, so it's only about that half a year. And then if the agency is not taking an action, it either goes away and comes off the books, or the agency requests an extension to do whatever work needs to come in order to finalize that rule. So in the meantime, Access is doing a bunch of work on this to try and, again, make sure that we are following the rule that is in place, that emergency rule. We are coming into compliance with that. And then, again, working to make sure that our health plan, including DDD, when I say a health plan, also follows the requirements. And we do this a couple of different ways. We have the Access Medical Policy Manual, which is probably the set of policies that most of you on this call are familiar with. And then we also have the Access Contractor Operations Manual that's more specific to our health plans and the requirements that they have to implement. So why does all of this matter? Because at this point, you're probably wondering why I'm talking to you about this largely bureaucratic process of going through a rule. It's not typically what you hear when you come to forums from Access or others. We don't typically talk a lot about a rule. We talk about policies, we talk about service delivery and how members receive services, but we don't go into this technical piece very often at this level. But it is important in this instance that you understand that we do have this emergency rule, and also understand the longer term requirements that our agency has to address in order to maintain compliance. But first and foremost, the rule did some really good things, that emergency rule. The governor's office, Governor Hobbs, as well as our agency, definitely heard that there were concerns with some of the policies that we implemented on October 1st. There were concerns about the timeline of which they were implemented, some of the changes, And so hearing that feedback, Governor Hobbs directed Access to pause the policies, specifically that H&T for children under the age of 18. And she did this, she announced this in a press release in October. When this slide deck posts on our website, you are definitely able to click on all of these hyperlinks and get all of the information if you want to read more and you haven't already seen that press release. But basically, as part of that communication, it offered or more directed the agency to develop an exception process to ensure that where extraordinary needs exist, that the tool, that assessment tool does not account for, that there is a pathway to be evaluated to see if additional services are needed. And then that press release also mentioned that Access was instructed to take another look at that H&T itself and determine if any updates needed to be made from a clinical perspective in terms of more clarity around some of the tasks that are on there that are assessed for, age limits, or anything like that. So what this did in the short term, it's provided some relief to members and families, as well as advocates and providers, because there was this concern about the policies and what that impact may ultimately be to the person who needs these services. And so it gives us a little bit more time to do that work. It gives providers some time to understand the policies, and ultimately it gives members that longer runway of time to engage in services that they were accustomed to receiving while we go through these updates. From there, it also gives us the opportunity to re-engage with the community, including you all, so that we can rework the policies and we can make some updates. And we're going to talk about that in just a minute, a little bit more in depth. So what have we done so far? And when I say we, what has Access done so far? We've had a number of steps that we've had to take. The first being that as soon as that emergency rule was approved by the Secretary of State, we started to meet with stakeholders to hear what needed to be updated. So we absolutely did not want to make that decision in a vacuum. We wanted to hear community feedback, whether it be from individuals that had already gone through that assessment process with those new policies before there was that pause implemented. We could hear provider concerns, clinician concerns. So wherever there were groups that were interested in providing feedback, we've absolutely made that attempt to engage and start those conversations. So some of the groups that we've met with all of our health plans. Again, when I say health plans, I also mean DDD. We've met with parents and parent representatives, legal advocates, providers and provider advocates, intellectual and developmental disability experts that are engaged in our delivery system and work in our state, and then community-based developmental pediatricians, as well as other community-based clinicians, just again, to hear perspective, to see where there may be opportunity and determine what next steps should look like. From there, we took that feedback and drafted policies that now have posted for public comment. They went live about 3 o'clock this afternoon. So if that is of interest, we'll talk a little bit more about how you can see all of those and how you can review and engage with us, but they are available for your review. Some policies, such as our H&T, have been revised. One policy is the exception process or extraordinary care review process. That's a new policy. So that one we have not had a policy on that before. So there won't be any red line in there, but for those others that are revised, where those policies have existed before, you're going to see red line comments so you can see what all Access is updated if you are interested again in reviewing them. So a little bit more about the policies. What policies have we updated or created? So there's 4 major policy documents that we posted for public comment. That includes 1620-17A. That's an exhibit that is basically that needs assessment, that needs tool. So when a member is assessed for home and community-based services, this looks at those attendant care services or those direct services, as well as habilitation. There's also guidance documents that are posted. So these guidance documents really are intended for case managers and support coordinators as a reference, but we do post them so that everybody has the same information and understands how those conversations may be approached when you're meeting with your support coordinator to talk about the needs of your child. So those are available for review. And then that new policy in our Access Contractor Operations Manual is our extraordinary care review process. And that translates to an exception process and means that if you have concerns, again, on that H&T, on that assessment that is tied to an age limitation, you can go through this extraordinary care review process, and it will be determined by an independent individual that's not your case manager or support coordinator to see if there's additional services that should be authorized. There's also an attachment with that new ACOM 450. It is a set of data requirements that our health plans are going to have to submit to Access so that we can monitor that extraordinary care review process and the outcomes related to individuals that go through that exception. So in order to meet the requirements of that rule we were talking about, as well as state law and federal regulations, our policies have been open for an expedited public comment period. Basically, that means that they're going to be posted for 14 days in order to review and provide that feedback. So if you want more information about how to review the policies, they are posted again on our website. You can review them as well as submit public comment at that location, access.commentinput.com/comment. Again, these slides are going to be posted on our website. So if it's not easy to find the public comment piece, you can just click on this link and it will take you right to it. Also, if you're interested in getting more information about policies as we post them, because we do policy work throughout the year, you can also sign up to receive emails so that you know anytime we've posted a new policy for review and if there's an opportunity and when there's an opportunity for public comment. In addition to posting the policies, we thought it was really important to have an in-depth conversation about those policies. And so we have scheduled 2 additional webinars. The first one occurring next Thursday morning, or Thursday morning. I say that like it's a long time away and it's like 3 days away. And then another one a week from now, Monday night, again, same time that we're having this webinar. And so we wanted to give people a little bit of time to read those policies if you're interested, and then we'll walk you through in depth each policy, the updates, and some of our starting point rationale of why we worded things the way we did or why we made revisions the way we did. And then we can answer any questions that are specific to those policies. So next steps, what's happening after this? Again, we hosted another forum just like this one last week, so I wanted to make you aware of that. That slide deck is already posted on our website. It's under all text policy updates. We will also be posting a recording of the forum so that you can reference back if that's easier to review or to hear that this conversation again. Our policies posted earlier today for public comment. And again, because of that expedited review, they'll remain on our website for comment until 5 p.m. on Monday, November 24th. So we also want to continue to engage with the community. So we recognize that there is a lot of opportunity to hear feedback and hear thoughts and what the experience is in trying to navigate our delivery system. So as you're a parent and you are trying to support your child as they get care and services, we want to hear about that. For providers, what do our policies mean and how and what are the implications? We in no way take for granted that day-to-day experience that comes with supporting your child or being a member yourself or providing the services and doing the work to make sure that everyone that should be receiving services is able to. And so we want to hear from you. Like, what's on your mind? What are your thoughts? If you have ideas on how we can engage further. So maybe where you want to converse with us is not specific to policies. That's not your jam. Not everybody likes policies. Trust me, I get it. But you do have ideas about what we can do to better serve people or how we can be more consistently available to have conversations. Please let us know. Like, don't feel like you have to talk to us about just one thing because it's what we've brought to you tonight. So we really do want to have that opportunity to hear from you. And we'll talk in just a little bit about how you can get in contact with us if you want to. Also want to talk about what's going to happen with the emergency rule. So I said earlier, it's valid for 180 days. That basically gives us until April 13th of 2026. So there's some work that has to happen between now and then. Part of that is that we're going to have to pursue regular rulemaking. And again, you may be sitting here listening to this and like, I don't care what this process is. This seems like some government thing. I'm not interested. And I totally respect that. And if engaging in rulemaking is not for you, no concern. So we want to give you the opportunity, if you do want to know more about the process, or if you have thoughts on the process, to give us feedback and at least know what's happening and why it's happening. So when we talk about regular rulemaking, that is basically creating a permanent rule in the Arizona Administrative Code. And when I say permanent, it's because there's a regular rule is not time limited. Every 5 years, regular rules are reviewed to make sure that they're still needed, make sure they're valid, make sure they're still appropriate. But otherwise, unless there's a formal action to take the rule off the books, they're there for an agency to comply to. And that means that from an access perspective, we need to look at that emergency rule and everything that was outlined in there, figure out if we need to make changes, if there's additional opportunities, and then go through that rulemaking process. And that's important because if we do that, as we do that, when that rule is approved, then that's a long-term requirement that we have to meet, which then impacts how you all receive services or how your child receives services or how the provider agency has to comply with service delivery. So again, it may not be that you want to be part of that process, but you should still know that it does have implications to the bigger picture and how services are delivered. So as we go through that process, there's a lot of things that we're going to have to do. And I'm not going to break it all down for you tonight. Like, if anyone wants to have rulemaking theory 101 conversations, let me know. But I just want to highlight a couple of things that we think are really important for you all to be aware of. First and foremost, lots of informal feedback. So we're having conversations all the time. And even the conversations that we had around the policies that we talked about a little bit earlier, also helps us figure out what do we need to think about when we go to make this regular rule. We have to do an economic impact study, which again is a government term to basically say we have to look at what's going to be an impact to business. Business being the state business being providers as part of the delivery system. And so we have to do this process to evaluate what this rule may do or not do to the economy that is our state. We have to have a formal public comment process that is a 30-day period, and that concludes with a hearing that we will hold at Access, including virtual options, as I understand it, where we receive that formal feedback. So if someone has a concern they would like to raise verbally and did not put anything in writing, they have the opportunity to come and converse with us and share their thoughts and concerns, if any, about that rule. And then from there, we move into a presentation and hearing with a group that's called the Governor's Regulatory Review Council. You'll probably hear me reference that as GRRC, the GRRC. And so we have that formal presentation to them. They ask us questions. There's an opportunity for public comment. And then if they think that it's appropriate to go forward, they approve it, and it moves to the Secretary of State for signing. And then that rule is in place that Access is now required to uphold and implement with policies or things like that. So it's a big cycle. Again, lots of steps, very government bureaucracy, but it does ultimately impact, again, that service delivery piece. So we want you to be aware of that. And we do intend to have another forum that's going to specifically do a deep dive on this. So if there is that interest, there's more opportunities to come to have those conversations. So some things that you need to know, again, it's mainly for agency purposes, but it does impact the health plans to some degree as well when we have rules in place. It's similar to how the federal government creates rules around Medicaid and service delivery that we're also required to comply with. Very similar here. We're going to be starting this process soon as we work through the policy pieces that we talked about earlier. Then we'll transition to doing this regular rulemaking. And we absolutely intend to seek feedback in a number of ways. Again, we really want to hear from you all. What do we need to think about? What do we need to consider? So there will be public forums. There will be stakeholder work groups. There will be opportunities for public comment. And if there's additional ideas, if you think we're missing something, if there's a better way to present information, at azaccess.gov. And for those of you on the call, if you know that PPCG acronym, which stands for Parents as Paid Caregivers, I don't want to create any confusion. When we talk about all of this stuff, it's not specific to Parents as Paid Caregivers, but that email address is the best way to access all of the people at our agency that need to be aware of your feedback quickly. And so we continue to use that email address, one, because it was familiar, and two, you get all of us with one email. So you don't have to keep track of a bunch of emails or email addresses. So timelines, what is this going to look like over the next few weeks? So we're here tonight with our other informational public forum as a follow-up from last week. Also today, we released those policies for public comment. So we've done those two things that are on our timeline, and the type A side of my brain that likes to check things off now has 2 check marks that says we've done the things that we needed to do. From there, we have several things that are going to happen. So we need to have a couple of the more forums to do that in-depth policy review, which we think is really important. We also, so again, we'll have one in the morning and one in the evening because we realize that schedules are not always super flexible. From there, as mentioned earlier, those policies are going to close for public comment on November 24th. In early December, that's our goal to try and finalize the policies. And when we finalize the policies, once we're able to wrap all of those up, then we're going to start working on that regular rulemaking process as well. And so we'll start doing some rulemaking work while the policies are with the health plans to begin to implement. Those will also be made available to the public so that you know what was updated. We intend to, again, come back and share the information and the changes so that you are aware if there's anything that's different from what's posted today to that final version. We're going to be having a bunch of conversations to get feedback on the rule side of things. So again, we've kind of got two processes going on here. And then in early January, around that first week in January, is when we anticipate that new assessment tool is going to be implemented and begin to be used. And so won't happen in this calendar year, but shortly thereafter, first part of January, that new assessment tool will be in place if all goes well between now and then. Also in early January, our health plans, again, including DDD, will be finalizing and implementing their exception process. So that extraordinary care review process, they will be putting the pieces in place to make sure that if there is a request for that, if there is a concern on those assessed hours based on these age limits, that there's a pathway to have that review, to have that conversation, to have that formal evaluation to see if there's additional services that are needed because of members' unique conditions or needs or things like that. And then from there, health plans will be doing their work. Access will be doing our work to move towards implementing that rule. We'll have our presentation to GERC, and assuming that no major concerns are raised, we'll then be at a point where that rulemaking piece is finalized and signed off on. And then we'll be on to other things. So there's a lot happening, but this work that we're currently on will theoretically have a timeline that runs out, but that doesn't mean that we just go back into the ether and we don't have these conversations. We will have other opportunities. I'm sure there will be new programs or policy revisions or things like that that we'll still have ways to engage. And so that will also be down the road. So how to engage with us right now? Again, we would welcome any thoughts or feedback, ideas you may have. Public forums are a great way to get information and know what we're thinking and kind of like what our timeline and next steps look like. You can email us again. That's here for your review. And it can be questions and concerns, ideas, anything that you feel that we need to be aware of. We definitely welcome that insight. Other ways you can engage. You can talk to your support agencies or advocacy organizations. And when I say that, I also mean like your service organization, so your provider organization. So if you have questions or want to understand what may impact them, or you want to talk to a group that's more of an advocacy group, definitely have those conversations if that's where you feel more comfortable. At the end of the day, if you don't want to have a conversation with Access for whatever reason, totally respect that. But if you have ideas to share, please find someone that can do that on your behalf. We don't want you to feel limited if the way that you want to go about it is different than having a direct conversation with my team and I, or through an email. There's other ways to get us information. You can also talk to your health plan. I'm sure that none of them would be opposed to having conversations and hearing your thoughts, and they absolutely will share that with us if they think it's an Access issue that we need to address or an opportunity we need to address. If it's something that they themselves can take care of, they have the ability to do so. We don't want to make anything more cumbersome, but we also, again, don't want to limit how you choose to engage and where you're comfortable having those conversations. And if it's your case manager that you're most comfortable chatting with, you should do that. Again, you can choose to review the policies that are open for public comment and provide us feedback. There's a way to do that in writing. There's a process that's outlined on our website for submitting that. You can read the regular rule when the time comes. If that's something that you really do want to know more about, you're definitely welcome to have a seat at that table, have that conversation, look at the rule, ask questions about the rule, challenge our assumptions, share your thoughts. Again, any of these pieces, you definitely should feel empowered to share your experience and seek clarification if it's not clear, if you have concerns. We've talked about the public forums. Again, we've had these general overviews. The slides and recording are posted on our website under the All-Tech Policy Updates. Again, going to do another plug for those policy reviews that are coming up. And then we also will be having some additional forums around the policy updates and that planned final policy review piece once we've got your public comments back in and have had an opportunity to review them. And then we'll do an in-depth overview of rulemaking and a deep dive of everything you need to know about that and how you can engage if you want to. So you've heard me say this is posted on our website, but how do you actually get there? Long email or long address, but if you go to azaccess.gov, click on members, already covered, and then member resources, that's where you're going to find all of this information. It looks kind of like this when you click on access member resources. There's a bunch of different options. In that top one, that all text policy updates, that's where you're going to find the recording, the slides, more information that we have about these policies. There is information there about the forums, although that's not the only place on our website where you can get that information. But this is a good central hub to get the most up-to-date information and things to direct your attention to. Also there, we have some frequently asked questions, or FAQs. And so we posted FAQs when that pause first occurred in mid-October. And it has some questions about what does the pause mean? What does the policy updates entail? We are going to be updating these regularly. I would anticipate a couple of updates later this week, given where we are in this process and that we've had policies post for public comment. So definitely you can check that out and get more information. The link is here. Not that anybody wants to immediately jot that down, but it will be, if you can find this presentation, you'll be able to click on that hyperlink and it'll take you right to the FAQ without trying to navigate. All right, so with that, I'm going to ask Dara if there's any questions that I can answer.
Sure, hold on just 1 second. I'm dialing up to the top. Okay. We had a question about just why did Access take a look at the HCBS needs tool, period? Like, why did we start making changes to the assessment tool? So kind of going back maybe and just talking about parents as paid caregiver and how that, while not directly related to the assessment, but how that required us to change and look at our assessment related to children under the age of 18.
Got it. That's a great question. So you want the really long history, which I'm not going to do. The H&T, the way it's designed now, was first created somewhere around 2013. And so it's a general requirement of access that we review our policies every couple of years, even if we don't have big updates that we need to make, again, just to make sure that they're reasonable. And so there's been some adjustments since that time, but the big work that started a couple of years ago came from a new waiver that Access received. So you heard me mention earlier the Parents as Paid Caregiver program. That is a waiver service that was approved by the Centers for Medicaid, for Medicare and Medicaid Services, so CMS. And as part of that waiver, we had to revise policy to align with that approval that we had from the federal government. And so when we talk about a waiver, that's basically, for lack of a better term, like a contract between the federal government and the state that says, you now have permission to do this, such as allow parents to be paid to provide services to their minor children, but you also have to do these requirements. So you get to do this, but here's what you have to do to ensure you do it appropriately. And so we started the process to review the H&T to make those updates and adjustments to implement that waiver. From there, there was different pieces that impacted that, from community feedback to House Bill 2945 that was signed into law earlier this year through the legislature. And so it's kind of gone from there, and we've made a bunch of different updates, and that gets us close to where we are. We're, as of the end of, or I guess early September, we posted those final policies. They implemented on October 1st, and then they were paused, and now we find ourselves here. So it very much is an iterative process, which on face value, policy is intended to be a living, breathing document. So it's not uncommon to see changes occur. It's just the frequency that we've seen it happen this past year is definitely a bit outside of our normal review process. But it is a standard process that we go through, and we make updates and adjustments as needed to support service delivery.
So we have another question, if you could, regarding the stakeholders that you talked about that were consulted. In addition to the groups of folks on the call tonight, but who are those specific stakeholders? So if you could go maybe back to that slide and give a little bit more detail in relation to who exactly are those individuals that we've engaged with.
Yep, give me one. Uh-oh. That's not moving. Give me 1 second to try and get my screen to move. Oh, there it goes. Sorry, look away if you don't want to see. I don't even know what slide that was on.
You just had it. Maybe two more.
Oh, okay.
There you go.
Okay. So some specifics, and I excuse my memory if I forget some, because we've had a lot of conversations. So first and foremost, the health plans. We've had lots of conversations with DDD and staff there. We've had lots of conversations with the EPD health plan. So that's United Healthcare Long-Term Care, Mercy Care Long-Term Care, and Banner Long-Term Care. So they've been at the table. We met with Raising Voices and the Raising Voices Coalition, so Brandy Kuhn and others that were invited to that conversation. We have had conversations with representatives from the Arizona Centers for Law and the Public Interest, the Morris Institute, Disability Rights Arizona. We have had conversations with APAD, so that's the advocacy group that represents a good majority of providers on the DD side. although some do cross over into the EPD or the aging and physically disabled side of services as well. We have talked to representatives from Care from the Caregivers, Encircling Families, from individuals that serve on our DDD independent oversight committees and have that long-standing history of evaluating service delivery. Let's see. We've had a number of pediatricians and other clinicians that have come to the table. So groups from the multi-specialty clinic in Tucson that does a lot of these services, physicians from Phoenix Children's, physicians from, oh my goodness, Barrows, the Barrows neurology team. Let's see, who else? Arizona Autism United, and we've had conversations there. We've had community-based speech and language pathologists and occupational therapists weigh in. I'm sure I'm forgetting someone, and if you're on and you're like, what's she doing? We just had this conversation. I apologize, but those are the ones that immediately come to mind. So we really tried to get a wide swath of representatives from different experiences and different perspectives to understand strengths, weaknesses, concerns, challenges. And if there's a group out there and you're like, well, you didn't talk to me, please know that you can reach out if you want to have that conversation. I'm not opposed to that in any way. But that's where we started so far.
Great. So we have a comment around the sustainability of the DDD program and concerns about, so while you just described all the reasons why we've had to relook at the HCBS needs tool for children under, or for members under the age of 18, there also have been conversations regarding the DDD budget and sustainability. So this particular individual has just a concern about, I'll just go ahead and read it. I don't know that you need to respond to it, but I have concerns with the cost of this program. These members are only children for 18 years, but they are in the adult system for 50 years. As parents age and are unable to care for their children, the system needs to be in place for them. When making these decisions to fund this program, please be aware that the adults often have no one but the DED system.
I thank you for reading that comment. And I do want to say a couple of things at a high level. First and foremost, we totally understand that bigger picture. And DDD in particular has done a great job highlighting some of those fiscal impacts and concerns. And if you didn't join forums that were held earlier this year, where Zane Garcia Ramadan broke down some of those budget implications. He's the assistant director over DDD, for those that don't know. He did a great job going into in-depth and providing data and kind of the state of the state when it comes to DDD. And that absolutely is an important consideration that we at Access, as well as at DDD and others, do not take lightly, and is absolutely something we have to have conversations on and really start solutioning around. At the same time, getting these services right and going about this process in the correct way to meet those needs also has to be done. And so that's another important aspect of this work and doing this policy work. We have to go through that process as well. And so there has to be, I don't want to say a balance, because I think they're really both really chunky issues that we need to spend some time with. And so that's what I want to leave you with, is that we are absolutely committed to doing that work and getting down to it. I think it may go without saying, but just in case, like, there are changes that are coming to the Medicaid program. That is a fact. We don't know necessarily what that is going to look like specifically for Arizona, but we do know that we've seen unprecedented population growth. We've seen unprecedented need. And so we have to be mindful about what that looks like and what the future looks like. And so that is a big lift that we need to take on, and we need to do it together. So at the end of the day, it can't be a decision that I make or that Access makes or that DD makes independently. We're going to have to work together on some of those solutions. And so if you have ideas, definitely share those, and know that future work is coming very quickly around all of that to start to understand those long-term implications. Because to the commenter's point, our all-text delivery system is a long-term continuum. It is not a moment in time, but in many instances, it is birthed through all of the things that life has to offer to that end-of-life care and ultimately death. And we have to be prepared to support a member at every stage and phase of their experience in our system. And so thinking about that's going to be really critical.
So we have a question around, I think it would help to clarify again, because I think the child assessment and how that relates to, or why we had to make that change to comply with the new waiver approval for parents as paid caregiver. But the question is specifically, so how does this relate and account for parents of minors that are single parents and unable to provide the attendant care and attendant care supervision and have goals? For instance, I rely on provider help for 2 special needs kiddos that I cannot do. So kind of explaining again how the child assessment tool is not specific to people who are parents who might be providing the care themselves, but who rely on other caregivers.
Makes sense. So when it comes to that assessment for services, so when we talk about that HNT that looks at the direct care services or attendant care services like eating and feeding and bathing and mobility or supervision or habilitation, when we talk about those services, the tool is really intended to figure out what are the unique needs of the member. And it's having a conversation with the member if appropriate, but definitely the family, the parent, whomever, to understand what are those needs? What does that day look like? Like, how does that individual engage in the task being assessed? And from there, there's a couple of different conversations that shoot off of that. So it could be that there's people in the child's life that want to be there and have time with them and engage, don't necessarily want to go through the process of being a paid caregiver, but has a couple of hours to spend in a day or a week, whatever the case may be, and they're willing to help out in that manner. So there's an informal support for which no one's obligated to do, but absolutely should be accounted for if there's that ability and interest. After that, once you know like how much service is needed, then you have a conversation about who should provide those services. And it could be a parent. Again, we have that parent as paid caregiver option. And for parents that want to engage in that way, absolutely can. There's a number of parents or guardians that don't want to engage in that way and want to have a job outside of the home or outside of caregiving or whatever the case may be. And either path is appropriate for what works for the needs of that child and that family. And so if the conversation's had, it really is, these are the different providers in the state that can deliver these services, finding one that is a good fit for the family, that there's comfort with, and then that provider agency is responsible for finding those caregivers that can deliver those services. And ultimately it may be, again, parent may say, actually, I want to deliver those services, and there's a path for doing that. But if there's not that interest or ability, it is the obligation of the health plan and the providers to develop that support and ensure access to all of those hours that have been assessed for. So don't feel like, if you're on here as a parent and you're like, that's not for me, don't feel like you are obligated to do it. Totally fine. There will be other ways, and it could be family members, it could be friends, or it could be someone that is hired by the agency that you have the opportunity to get to know and make sure you're comfortable with, but has no prior relation or knowledge to your family. And all of those options are available for care and support.
So Jakenna, we have a few comments or questions about the policy. So people have gone into and looked at the policies that have been already posted today. So I know I think we'll use these questions to help inform the presentation that'll be happening on Thursday and the following Monday, because we want to keep this to the scope of the presentation so we don't cause confusion. But so those of you who submitted comments around the policy specifically, will work to address those during those specific sessions, and we'll highlight those again for you today before we close out. But there's one question I thought, Jakenna, that we could address to just help people start to look at the policies, and it's really one just around the structure of the policy. So we had a question around the difference between like the blue underlined or the language in policy that's red and struck through. So can you explain just a little bit, just when people are looking at the policy, how to look at it from the perspective of what's new language and what might be language that has been struck or modified?
Great question, and I will try and explain it without like a visual aid. So basically anything that is, hold on, I'm gonna go to a slide real fast. It's gonna help with some of this. So for these 1620-17 policies or documents, those are all existing documents. So if you see red or blue or whatever colored text in there, that should indicate that it's new text. Now, please don't ask me why it shows up in different colors. I don't know. Microsoft probably has an answer for that. But you should assume that anything that is colored language in those 1620 documents is a revision. And again, I don't know why they're different colors. Every time I opened them, I think to do work on it, I think I saw different colors sometimes. So it is a mystery of the world. But assume that colored text or anything that has that mark through is a change from the previous version that had been published for ease of reference. On the HCBS needs tool specifically. So I don't know how much time you've spent in Excel, but it's not as easy to track changes. So our intention was to change the language, or to change any updates to red so that you could see what has changed or been added. Again, it's not an auto process, kind of like what you can do in Word, but hopefully everything is captured there so that you can see what's been added. If there's a line through it, it means it was previous language there that is now coming out of those policies, especially on that Excel document. For ACOM 450, that extraordinary care review policy or exception process, I think everything in there basically is going to be black text. There may be a hyperlink here or there, but for the most part, that is a brand new policy. And so instead of having the entire thing in a track change or indication that it was new language, just know going into that, it's a brand new policy. It's never been viewed publicly before. We've never had anything like it before. And so all of it's new. All 9, 10, however many pages we ended up at, all of that is brand new. So I'm hoping that helps. We'll do some more in-depth on that in the policy forums, but basically the color, unless it's a hyperlink, all of the colors you may see should all indicate that it is a change from the version it was previously.
Thank you. Can you go back to the slide that has the timeline in it? Because we have a couple questions, or clarifying questions around that. Excuse me. Keep going. There we go. So, first question, so if you can go over this again, when are we expecting the new HNT to go into effect?
So we don't have an exact day on here, but early January. So I'm going to say somewhere around that first week in January, which, if memory serves, is somewhere around, I think, January 5th is a Monday. Don't quote me on that, but our intention is right around then. Now, there's a number of factors that could impact that. So it is dependent upon the public comments we get, if we have minor updates, if we have major updates to the policies, and how quickly we can do that review and finalize those policies. So from the day that we finalize policies at Access and post those out, oh, hold on, sorry, I don't know what that did. From the day we finalize those policies and post them, our health plans need time to implement those policies. And that is everything. They may need to do system updates, or they may need to make updates to documents that they use. They absolutely have to do training for their case managers or support coordinators. And so we have to give them time to do that work sufficiently. So we don't have that hard date there yet. As we get closer to that time frame, we will have a specific date available to share with you all. But just know that our intention right now is for that to occur in early January.
And then can you reiterate two things? For children, maybe we can go back to that slide that you had in the beginning around what's happening now. And then speak to it from a child perspective, but then also what about adults?
Sure.
So members over the age of 18.
Okay. So first, that was a good level set. Like, everything that we're talking about right now is really geared towards our under 18 population, our All-Tex population. So from a child perspective, if you've been in on the All-Tex program for a while, you really shouldn't experience too much of a change right now. You may have gone through an assessment if you were assessed in early October, but that should not have ultimately had any long-term impact, since we have paused that tool and instructed our health plans to revert back to the hours that the members were receiving prior to 10/1. So right now should be status quo. The hours you were receiving in mid to early September, into September, should be the hours that you're receiving now. Again, unless you made a request as a parent to discontinue, or you've needed to be the child needed to be reassessed and there's been changes made to their service array, but otherwise status quo. If you're a new member, so if you stumbled upon this forum, just became your child just became an All-Tex member, whatever the case may be, you would go through this comprehensive service planning process, which includes this HCBS services assessment. And so from there, services would be assessed. If there's an identified need, they would be authorized. and all of that would play out. If you're a member, a child who's had a change in condition, you call your case manager support coordinator and talk about what's happening and determine you need to have that assessment to make sure that the services that are authorized are still appropriate. That should also be occurring. So this pause doesn't mean you don't have access to your case manager or support coordinator. It doesn't mean that the work behind the scenes is not occurring. It just means that the tool being used to determine how much services may be appropriate is paused. And it's back to what you were seeing earlier this year, if you were a member at that time. From an adult perspective, and when we say adult for purposes of this, we're talking about that 18 and older age group. Not really a lot of impact. So the tool that went live on 10/1 was not paused. It was not impacted, so it's available. There weren't a lot of updates that were made on the adult side of things as of October 1st. And so again, visits should be occurring as typical. Assessment should be occurring as typical. So there shouldn't be too much of a change there either in terms of the process. It's just that the policies used and the tools used for that did have some updates on 10/1 that are still in effect. So we're still doing all of the things that were outlined in the 10/1 policies with the tool that was provided on 10/1. So hopefully that helps answer that question.
Okay, thank you. Excuse me, I lost my place here. Okay, can you talk a little bit about, there's still some confusion just generally about how we're structured with long-term care and the Altex program with DDD and the EPD health plans, and then also tribal Altex. So if you can just kind of clarify those and then I guess confirm that everything applies to each one of those different, I guess, elements of our, or eligibility groups within our long-term care program.
Got it. So we'll start at the federal level. The federal government has requirements for Medicaid. That includes acute care, behavioral health care, and long-term care services. When we talk about Altex, we are talking about long-term care services. And so the federal government has high-level requirements that states are required to meet, and then they give us funding to meet those requirements. And I mentioned the waiver a little bit earlier. So again, that's that negotiation between the state and the federal government of how we're going to implement the Medicaid program. And so we negotiate and then we get a contract, basically. We get a waiver to do that work. So we have what's called an 1115 waiver. We won't do too much of a deep dive on waiver theory or anything like that. But again, that's a document that says, Arizona, this is what you're obligated to do to implement your Medicaid program, and this is what we expect to see from you back to the federal government. So from there, when it comes to our long-term care delivery system, we have two sides of our system. We have our aging and physical disability side. That's called our Elderly and Physical Disabilities Program, or EPD. We have 3 contracted health plans that deliver those services across the state. So again, the population is largely an aging population, so older individuals, but we do have around 400 or 500 children that have a physical disability that are also enrolled in the EPD program in one of those contractors or one of those health plans. The other side of our Altex program is our developmental disabilities program. And so we at Access, again, get those monies from the federal government. And then just like we have a contract with our 3 health plans on the EPD side, we have a contract with the Division of Developmental Disabilities to deliver all of the Medicaid services to members who have an intellectual or developmental disability. So the vast majority of the budget that DDD utilizes comes from the federal government with a pass-through to access as a state Medicaid program. And then they implement those services in accordance with their contract with us, as well as all of the policies that are in place, some of which we talked about tonight. So there's a little bit of a different relationship in the fact that DDD is part of the Department of Economic Security, which is also a state agency. DDD staff are state employees, and so we are a sister agency. Both agencies are cabinet agencies, meaning that they report up through the governor. And so we absolutely respect that relationship as a sister state agency and our obligation to the broader state enterprise. But the majority of the services that DDD either delivers directly or subcontracts out to their health plans are Medicaid dollars that come from access. And when I say Medicaid dollars, there are a lot of state dollars that go into that. So we have the ability to draw down federal dollars because the state puts a lot of money into. And so Medicaid services are not 100% funded by the federal government. The state has a responsibility to fund those services also. So there's a lot of nuances. We could have a whole webinar on Medicaid structure and how all of it works. But at the end of the day, the vast majority of the services that DDD provides are Medicaid services that are required to meet Medicaid requirements. And they all have to meet the federal authorities, the state authorities that are established by access. And then there are some carve-outs that are DD services that are established by the state that are not Medicaid funded. So there are like these little pockets and nuances, but again, the vast majority are those Medicaid dollars. For tribal All-Tech, so again, we have a population or the ability in Arizona. Most of our services are delivered through managed care, which is those contracts with our EPD plans and DDD. But for individuals who are American Indian or Alaska Native, they have the ability to choose. They can either be enrolled with a health plan or they can engage in a model that's called a fee-for-service model. And that's implemented by Access in partnership with all of our tribal entities around the state. And for tribal All-Techs, that's a case management component. So if you're think about the relationship you have with your case manager through your EPD plan or your support coordinator with DDD, we have tribal entities that have established case management entities to do that work, very similar to what happens on the managed care side. And so they have the same requirements to go through, the same policies to some extent. Not all policies, the way they're structured on the managed care side, are structured for fee-for-service, but the vast majority are the same, especially when it comes to All-Techs. And so we have an amazing tribal All-Techs team at Access that does that interface with all of our tribal partners, does the same type of training and education. I will say we have very few children that are on tribal All-Techs. The vast majority of individuals served under tribal All-Techs are adults, but there are some, and as such, these policies also apply to them as well. That's probably more than you ever wanted to know about Medicaid history or structure or theory, but
Great. I'll reiterate that we do have some folks asking questions regarding the policies that were posted today. So those of you who are asking those questions, we will utilize the chat transcript from today's meeting to help inform the structure for the forums that we're going to have later this week. So, Jakenna, maybe you could highlight that one slide again related to the forums that are happening, the one on Thursday and the one on Monday regarding the policies that are out for comment.
Sorry, let's see. Okay.
There we go.
So Thursday morning, if you're interested in that deep dive review of policy, we'll be getting together from 10 to 11:30, going through each document in more detail and some of the rationale behind it, and then taking any comments or feedback that you may have or answering questions, similar to what we're doing here. Then there's also one a week from today, same time as this forum, 6 p.m. So if you aren't available Thursday morning, there's another opportunity. Similar to this, we will post the slide deck on our website as well as a recording so that you can reference both if you're not able to make either session but want to know what was said. So those are coming up soon. And in the meantime, you can absolutely start submitting public comments. If you want to, like, shout out to those of you that have already gone out and read that. Like, that's amazing to hear that that's already happening. So don't feel like you have to wait until the last day. If you have an immediate thought that you want to get out there for us to consider, go ahead and get that submitted. Definitely come to the forums and we'll have those conversations as well.
So in our final minutes here, if we could also, we'll put in the chat, maybe Desiree, you can help with that, the links to where the policies are located, just to have that additional reinforcement for you all. And we did get the one question that we received last session as well regarding the clarification around, this is more specific policy related, but it's coming up again in the session too, Jakenna, around what exactly the requirement is if a parent is, there needs to be care overnight. And considering parents to provide the care overnight hours, if you could just reinforce again what that entails and what documentation is required.
Sure. So as part of House Bill 2945 that was signed in earlier this year, there is a requirement in there for overnight hours from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. That can only be provided by a parent if there is a documented need. And so it's documented on the H&T or in the person-centered service plan. So that is a law that is in effect. There's been confusion because we implemented the policies on 10-1, some of it paused, and so what's in effect, what's not in effect. I think the short answer is that the requirement to have that documented is in effect. However, I think that that's creating a lot of concern among the provider agencies because the H&T prior to 10-1 didn't really contemplate that. It may not be as clearly documented as we had intended to do with the new 10-1 policy. And so want to be clear that if overnight care was being provided to a child prior to 10-1, overnight care should still be being provided to a child post 10-1, like during this pause. If there's a note in the person-centered service plan, if there's a note on an H&T, if there is a case note in the health plan case management system, all of those are reasonable things. And I think the fear is that if there's not that hard copy acknowledgement that this is happening, that it puts the service delivery at risk. That is not our intention from the agency perspective. We are not out for a gotcha with providers, with family members, whomever the case may be. Know that as we go through this policy work, we are going to have that very clearly delineated as we go forward in the revised tool. For now, ideally somewhere in that person-centered service planning process, there is a note at the health plan level that says it's occurring. It's part of that overall assessment, whatever the case may be. But regardless, if you, as a parent or as a provider, can formally see that written, if that has been occurring to date, it should continue to occur until a new assessment is completed. So if you have immediate questions, feel free to reach out to Access. I know this is a point of confusion. I probably didn't do the best job of explaining that last week either, and may have added more concern, but I want to hear that this is not a gotcha, this is not a test, this is not anything other than there's different ways that documentation may currently exist. And there may be instances where it's not as clearly articulated as our intention is going forward, but it is absolutely appropriate if that was being done before and continue to be done. Those overnight hours to meet that child's needs should continue.
Excuse me. Thank you, everyone. It looks like we're at the conclusion of our time. Excuse me. So a couple of reminders. If you've asked some questions related to the policies that were posted today, that will help inform our presentation later this week. Please consider attending one of those sessions. They will be identical, the session on the 13th and the session on the 17th. Obviously, the only difference is depending upon what questions attendees ask. And then we will also be using any of your comments to help inform updates to FAQs. So thank you to everyone for joining us tonight, and we look forward to seeing you either later this week or next week.
Thank you all. Have a good evening.